Okay, so for today, I'm going to be doing my final reflection for Math 414, and I'm going to be talking about some of the coursework that we've done in class because this was the most meaningful to me. And I feel like it really influenced my thinking, just that whole class discussion and being able to talk with all of my peers throughout the semester. I think stuff like that, it really changed the way I thought about mathematics when it came to teaching it. I had no idea what we were going to be doing when I came into this class. And I originally thought that it was going to be like, I actually thought it was just going to be kind of like the warm up leads, that it was just going to be a class full of that we're learning how to do a task and then presenting it, stuff like that. And it was completely different than what I thought. So, I'm going to be showing tasks specifically towards the beginning of the semester, just because that's when there was the biggest shift in how I thought about mathematics when it came to teaching it. And then towards the end, it was a bit more of like, okay, I have the hang of it. I think I know how to approach it. But yeah. So starting with the first slide, um, for this task, it was in class 3, and the reason I chose this is because I actually thought this task was going to be different. I think at first we had the washing machine task, and it was like, oh, what would be cheaper? And then we did the math for it. And this one, I was actually ready to do the math in it, and then I realized that we weren't looking at the math at first, and we were just looking at the two experiments at the top. So for that one, it says, for the first experiment, it says, you are an eighth grade student aiming to solve this task. What is your goal to learn? And your goal is to learn the math. What do you prompt the AI? How many times do you prompt it? And which chatbot will you use? And how are you likely evaluating the quality of the chatbot's response? And from an eighth grader's perspective, they most likely they are not evaluating the response at all. They're kind of just copy and pasting whatever. If they are not looking to learn it, if they are looking to learn it, then they could ask some follow-up questions like, why did you multiply this? Or why did you add this? Certain things like that. And how do you know this? Like certain things like that, an eighth grade student might ask. And what really kind of like, how do I say this? What really kind of hooked me on this specific warm up was actually experiment 2, which was you were an eighth grade math teacher and it asked us the same questions. And that kind of stuck with me just because I never really pictured myself using AI as a teacher. I always thought that, you find your worksheets online, you kind of work through them yourself, and then you build what you're going to teach off of that, stuff like that. And it was really interesting just because if I was a teacher using AI, I think some of the questions I would have asked it are, what are some questions student might ask? Where might they get stuck? Stuff like that. I think I might try to anticipate what the students might do. I think that's what I might use the AI for if I was using it for this assignment. And I would be evaluating the quality of the chatbot's response a lot. And I would most likely prompt it multiple times rather than just once or twice. But yeah, that was a really interesting warm up for me. And then for this one, it's the class 9 toy car problem. So we're given like a relationship between time and distance, and it's showing the slope. And all of these points are on the line, and it's asking us, so why do we only need 1 point? And this is when Noel actually showed me that if a relationship passes through the origin, so for example, this one had zero distance at zero time, so it passed through the origin, it was proportional. And I thought that was really interesting because I didn't know exactly, I didn't know that. And yeah, and we only need 1 point because we can just use that slope formula and always subtract 0, 0. And we can just scale up or down just to find something that we need. And I thought that was really interesting. The fact that if something wasn't through the origin, then it was not proportional. And for the next one, this is actually an example where something isn't proportional, but we'll get to that in the next slide. For this one, I put this because even though the warm up was there, something that Victoria said actually stuck with me, which was sometimes your students are not going to be 100% there for the lesson. They might look out the window for a bit and they get distracted just for a little bit. They might leave the bathroom, they could be daydreaming, something like that. So notation and the way you organize your work really does matter. This was the first time that I tried applying myself with that, which I think I did a pretty good job. I think I would have been able to do a little bit better if I was like writing on a whiteboard or presenting it as a teacher, rather than working on just one paper. But yeah, this was really interesting. I thought that I had to label every single thing that I was doing. And even looking back, I think there's some things that I could label again or that I could do a little differently, which was really interesting that I didn't do in my work before. And it even carried over into my other classes. Like I'm really showing my work for every little step now to make sure I build that habit for my students. And yeah, that was really interesting. And one of the reasons I also really like this task was because I got to show composed unit reasoning. And I had no idea what composed unit reasoning was before this course. Like I knew what it was, but I never realized I was applying it. And it was really interesting to get to treat two quantities as as like one unit. So that was really interesting to do in this course. And then for the next slide, here we go. For this one, it's kind of showing the why John's isn't proportional and how if you were to take that one coordinate and tie it back to the origin, it does change the slope. You're not factoring in that head start of 10 meters that he was given. And you can see at that top graph, when you do factor it in, his is parallel to Jalen's, and they are traveling at the same speed and traveling the same distances. It's just that John was given a little boost of 10 meters. So that's why his line is higher than hers. Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. I absolutely loved that. That is one thing that I don't know if I would have included in my graduate interview when I had to do the demo lesson just because I was so little on time. But this is some of these lessons were actually they inspired me so much for that interview, and I think the themes in it were really great. I learned so much off of these, and yeah, great lesson. This was kind of building off of that, showing that what happens if we do connect his to the origin and how it changes it, how to label the axis is. And something I want to do when I go into class is actually want to show my students why it matters what you label your axis as, because you are going to be getting a lot of questions in the classroom. I'm going to have students like asking me, well, how do you know that this axis is for meters, and how do you know that this one's for seconds or time? How do we know that? Why can't we just swap them and say it's correct? And how does that affect your graph? So this kind of is like when every time I reflect back on this one's kind of helping me anticipate those questions and getting very prepared for that. And it further explains on this worksheet why we only need 1 point, but I'm not going to get into that more just because I've already explained that. And then, okay. For this one, we did jump up quite a few classes, but this was really interesting just because one, I love making scenarios. I loved those on the summatives when it was like, oh, can you make a scenario where you're modeling this and stuff like that. It's really nice to be creative again and get to showcase different stories and stuff like that. And one of the things that I really liked about these, at least when I was in school, was that sometimes my teachers they would include student names in, which is something Victoria does in her summatives, which is really fun, and in the homework assignments. And everybody likes to be included. I mean, that's something I want to do in my classes, and I took that a lot. That everybody does appreciate it. I did learn that from this class, so that is something I'm going to apply to my when I do my student teaching. But the main point of me attaching this worksheet was the part B for this. When we were learning about variables and what they meant and how they are when they're what numbers as coefficients are and stuff like that. Me and my group members, we were actually stomped on this. I was like, oh wow, I don't know how to explain this. And then eventually started kick starting ideas. And then I think we got a bit more comfortable with it. But this was a really interesting one because I was able to actually pick apart each part of the expression and define what each component was, which was really nice. So I finally got to say, I do know what the four represents. It represents the four groups that we have, and X is a quantity in each group. And it's the same across all groups. And then 4X is our total amount across all groups. So that was really fun to do. Um, yeah, I didn't know that you could even separate an expression like that and pick apart each piece, which is something that I wanted to do for one of my interviews. I think I wanted to do it, but I ended up scrapping that idea. But it was really nice. It was really fun. I learned a lot from that. I think that is something that I never got taught in middle school when I was learning about variables. So I think I am going to try to instill that idea when I teach about variables. Like, they do mean something and they do have different meanings given their context. They are treated differently. Just because of these two variables, they're both x's. One of them could be an unknown number, some of them could be a parameter. It all depends. And then this one is going to be the last worksheet that I have attached. So the reason I attached this one was just because it really does tie in what 414 is all about as well, which is the fact that how to analyze student work and that students all have different perspectives when it comes to problems. When we originally did this, I did get the answer wrong, and I did think that it was I thought it was 40 squares and not 36. I think that was the amount that it's supposed to be. But yeah, I thought it was 40, and then I realized, I was like, oh yeah, it's not. And you have to factor out the corners. But yeah, so when we did this, if you asked me, I could only come up with like 2 to 3 ways. And there ended up being like, I think at least 6 different ways that you could approach this, which was nice that I got to hear from all of my peers around the class that there are different ways that you can do this. And it tied into that video that we had to watch. And one of the things that I liked about her teaching style is that she actually started with the incorrect answer when she led that class. He asked students who actually got 40 as their answer. And she was like, yeah, I know. I think I got 42. And she made the students feel comfortable. That was something that I really appreciated and I really liked seeing in that teaching video. So I think that's something that I have to incorporate into my student teaching. And I've just been picking up little things all throughout this course. And I'm like, yeah, I should probably do that. I should embrace this quality. I should do this. So this was another thing that I also got to do, which was really nice. And there were so many different ways that you could solve this. And you could see all those little kids when they were showing all their ways that they did it. It was really interesting to see that. And yeah, that was one of the reasons I incorporated, just because at the end of the day, there are so many ways to go about a problem. And you saw that up until our last summative, which was what's a way you could model it? Like, there's so many ways you could do these things. And that was the absolute, like, I just loved this exercise. And yeah, that was it for my final reflection. I really liked this course. I learned so much about it, connecting all the standards of mathematical practice to these um, class exercises. It was amazing. I really liked learning about that. There was so much I took away from this class and that I plan to incorporate when it comes into my teaching. It was one of the most valuable classes I have ever taken here at SDSU, and I really did learn a lot from this class.